What would you do if you asked a room full of kindergartners, what does it sound like in your head when you're in trouble? And the first answer you heard was, I hate you. Today's episode is about what we can do at home, at school, and at work so kids never have to believe that voice. And so we as adults can finally rewrite it too. Welcome back to the Mike Method. I'm Mike Desjardins, and today we're talking with Monique Marcotte, founder of Try, The Real You, a social emotional learning company that helps young people understand themselves from the inside out. Monique has spent 19 years in the classroom teaching both high school English and junior school physical and health education. She's led powerful empathy building programs with Challenge Day, one of the top school assembly experiences in North America. Her work sits at the intersection of emotional regulation, the nervous system, and mind-body connection. In this conversation, we get into the balloon theory of emotions, how to teach kids a better apology, and why the vagus nerve might be the one of the most important things a child or a leader can learn about. We talk about the 5 pillars of health she builds into her curriculum, how to help kids name and negotiate with their inner voice before it turns toxic, and what all of this means for those of us trying to lead teams and raise humans in an anxious world. Let's dive in. Monique, I really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. This is absolutely my pleasure to be here.
I want to hear all about the real you. And I think the best place for us, or the best way for us to tell the story, is actually to tell the story. So I would love for you to start from the inception. When did you first come up with the idea that this needed to be in the world?
Okay, well, I would love to say that it was my idea, and it absolutely wasn't. I really love that this podcast is about leadership because it was 2 people in California that came into my life in 2009 and absolutely just showed me that there were more possibilities than what had already been discovering myself. I had become a teacher in 2006 and I was at a beautiful school. And in my 3rd year, the counselors at my school asked if I wanted to be a part of a really special day that they were bringing in. And what it was this program from California called Challenge Day. And they asked if I wanted to be an adult participant. And I watched this 10-minute video. And I remember being in the library and it was on CD on like a disc. And it was watching this and just I had tears pouring out of my eyes by the end of this 10-minute intro video. And I was like, yes, absolutely. This is something I would like to be a part of. What it was a 1-day intensive workshop. And it asked high school age students to look beyond the masks that they wear or the walls that they've built in their lives and to see people for who they really are, but then also to show themselves their own vulnerabilities. And so this workshop started as a group of people across the room kind of looking at each other, judging one another, and 2 really awesome people from California that would facilitate this workshop. And by year 2 that my school had brought them in, I got brave enough to walk up to the Challenge Day leaders and I just said, how do I do what you do? Like, is this possible? And they smiled and they said, well, the first thing you need is a recommendation from a Challenge Day leader. And they looked at each other and they looked at me and they were like, and you have 2. And I was like, ah. The next January, I applied and I was accepted out of lots of applications I've heard. And I went down to train with these incredible humans down in Concord, California. And I went through this grueling 8-month process where they, one, taught me what they knew, but then also had me go through quite a vigorous training of undoing a lot of my learning and relearning a lot of compassion and empathy and just kindness for the world and in a deeper, more amazing way. But also in a California way, because in 2010, the year that I went down there to do all of this, they also had a TV show on MTV called If You Really Knew Me. It was the one and only year that it ever aired, but it was so cool because I got to go to the opening and the premiere and meet all of these like sort of semi-famous people, I suppose, and I got really swept up in the work. And after an entire year of training and getting accepted as the first Canadian to do this job, the government of the United States decided differently. And I was unallowed to move my travel visa to a working visa. And at the end of all of it, these two amazing humans that had started the program 25 years ago then, and now 40 years ago at this point, said, go back to your country and figure out how to do something with what you know now. And that was 15 years ago at this point, and I didn't know what to do at that point. I was 26 years old and heartbroken. I really wasn't expecting that as news, nor were they. I was the first Canadian they had ever accepted into the program, and I believe we all just sort of thought the work was so beautiful that this was just going to happen. I got sent home. So I tried to figure out what my next move was, and I'm from Saskatchewan, and moving back home was not it. I had just gone to California and spent 8 months in the sunshine and a few more in the rain, but that was something that I was able to get used to. So I thought, okay, Vancouver, here I come. And in 2011, I ended up on what I thought was Canada's California. So that's how I ended up here. And thankfully, what ended up coming into my life was the career that I'm currently in, which was getting a teaching position at YHS, where I now have met you and where we know each other from.
Amazing. And so with all that knowledge and this, bring it forth to Canada spirit, you came back, you land in Vancouver, you're at York House School. And so where do we go from there? So when did you finally realize, okay, I have the space and the time in my life to really create the vision for this program that I see that kids need?
Great question. I got really passionate 2011 and 2012. Started working with some counselors out in Coquitlam. They had had Challenge Day come to their schools, and so they had been working with the folks that I had been working with. And when they knew that there was a resident Challenge Day leader here in their vicinity, we started developing a program. This was also around the same time. I'm not sure if you'll recall the name Amanda Todd, but she was in the news quite a bit, and her mom was doing a lot of work out in Coquitlam. And so we had paired up once or twice and really felt like it was the time. And but at the same time, I was naive and I did not have enough confidence in myself. I really had a lot of limiting voices that I now see I needed to get over and rid of. And that took all the way up to 2023. It's interesting. I pulled out the book that you had given me on our first really great conversation, which happened in March of 2023. And you sent your daughter, Lily, to school with this awesome book. And it's dated March 8th, 2023. And I remember I ate it up. Like that day, I read it. And by, I'm sure, the 10th, I was already done. And on the 15th of March, my dad passed away. And I was in this state of flow. And I was thinking, I was like, this is my time, this is it. And when that happened, I thought, what? Like, how is this not my time? I was ready. I felt like it. And what actually happened was, unfortunately, like an arrow, sometimes you need to be pulled back to your depths before you get to be launched forwards. And what I do realize now was going through that process is what really created the limitless idea of life's way too short to wait. And it has been about 2.5 years now that I have pushed as far as I can to try to make this dream come true. It was a dream for 14 years, but now I really wanted to make it a reality.
So let's talk about the program itself. Walk us through from Challenge Day to now the Real You. What is the experience? Who's it for? And what are you hoping will occur as a result of somebody going through this?
Ooh, I like those. Okay, stacked questions. Let's see. Let's go back to the start.
Let's start
Where
with
did it? Okay. So Challenge Day was designed for high school age students, which is fantastic and amazing. But I switched from being a high school English teacher to becoming a junior school physical and health education teacher when an incredible colleague of mine and at York House passed away 8 years ago. It was a move that I would have never anticipated in my career. I loved teaching high school English, and I had no idea how to teach little children. It wasn't something in my repertoire. I remember being 18 in my practicum and making a little kindergarten child cry just by being near her. And it became one of my stories. One of my stories was I scare little kids. I remember when my nephew was turning 5, I had anxiety that he was going to stop liking me.
Mm,
I really had this story around it. And then this incredible teacher who was battling cancer asked if I could take care of her babies.
mm,
And when the most amazing teacher in the world asks you that, you don't say no.
mm-hmm.
So I became a junior school teacher, and Lily at this time was in grade 1. And there are so many regrets that I have from that year. My goodness. But what I really had to do was start pulling on my own challenge day lessons. I was being triggered because I didn't know how to teach these young kids. And all I wanted to do was be this awesome human for them. And yet, without the experience, I really tripped up on a lot of things that I would say. Honestly, talking to a 15-year-old is very different than talking to a 5-year-old, and needed to remember about the emotional balloon. And the emotional balloon is one of the metaphors that Challenge Day uses. And it also is, there's a separate company called Soul Shop that also uses this concept. And where Soul Shop began was from another amazing human that I worked with at Challenge Day. I'll never forget the first day that I arrived in California. She picked me up for lunch and she told me that she was one of the people that endorsed for me to get there. And she said, "I'm so happy that you're here and you're going to do great work with Challenge Day. But I am moving on. And so I just wanted to take you out for lunch to tell you that I'm quitting." I was like, "Oh no." But she said something that made the world of difference back in 2010. And it was, I love the work that Challenge Day does because it helps kids that are hurt. But
Mm.
what if we could hit these kids before they ever got hurt? What if
Wow.
we taught them resilience young?
Yeah.
And 3 years ago, I had this blessing opportunity with York House to go through ISABC leadership training. And it's a beautiful program run by the director of ISABC, Elizabeth Moore, and it requires a capstone project. And I was given the okay at York House to bring in Vicky's program from Soul Shop. So she took Challenge Day's concepts and wrote them for a younger age. And while I was using her materials, it clicked so well with these young students to use the balloon metaphor. And from there, I just continued to move forwards with what my teaching partner and I had started to develop in 2020 when COVID hit. Actually, I have them right here. But him and I are so proud of these health booklets that we created based off of the BC curriculum. And we have 22 comprehensive lessons that come straight from our curriculum. And so I was able to begin writing a program that used the balloon theory for emotional regulation, but incorporated our 5 pillars of health. And as I continued to teach throughout this unit and to finish my capstone project with ISABC, I had to do a final presentation in front of 15 administrators from all different other schools. And at the end of it, I had one of the principals from another independent school say, "Would you come teach that to my staff?" And I thought, oh my goodness, like, yes, I would love that. So she gave me an 11-day timeline. And in 11 days, I wrote down everything that I had taught that entire year when it came to the program and the social emotional learning lessons and everything. And I delivered my first workshop at Urban Academy. A year and a half ago, and I was absolutely stunned at how well it went. I didn't realize that there was this need at this point because Challenge Day has been around for so long. I had this assumption that we were all doing it, that there's a champion in every school that is doing social emotional stuff that's helping these young people. And what I have realized is that there is a need for more education when it comes to emotional regulation and the nervous system. And so now it just continues to blossom and flourish. At this point, I'm teaching about our mind body connection and how our brain is speaking to our bodies all the time, but how our bodies also are speaking to our brains and the messages that it gives us. And I am just and honored by the testimonials that my students have shared, or that one of the things that the grade threes love the most right now is creating skits. Can we make a skit? Yes, absolutely. Can we make a skit? We're talking about feelings and learning how to apologize properly. And the I message, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the I message, but my students now have memorized it, and it's pretty incredible.
Walk us through the iMessage.
Absolutely. So oftentimes when we are having big feelings, and this would be the balloon theory. Uh, Actually, I have a balloon right here. I was prepared. So the full balloon theory is I do show them a real balloon, and but I walk them through an age appropriate mourning of what it would feel like to be either frustrated or angry, mad, and have all of those really big feelings stuffed in and not have the time to express them and or deal with them. And so a lot of times it's your mom or dad comes into your bedroom and you're already late, so they're rushing you. So the balloon fills up. And then you can't find your kilt or your shirt or your tie, or it's got stains on it. And so you can't wear it, and so it fills up further. And then you get downstairs, and your little brother or your little sister has eaten all of the milk, and you now have to eat your cereal either dry or toast you didn't want, and the balloon keeps filling. For us adults, we have the same thing. Either we get to the coffee machine and there's the no more pods for the Keurig, or the your partner's drank the last of the oat milk and you wanted almond or whatever it is, right? And the balloon gets full, and then we get to work, or we're on our way to work, and there's traffic, and now we're feeling even more anxious, and the balloon gets more full, and you have your boss walk up to you or your teacher and says, okay, so where's your homework? Is it done? And you just want to turn around. And as the balloon gets more full, I ask the students, so what's going to happen if I keep blowing more air into here? And they all answer, it'll pop. And I say, yes, but we are very resilient people. So before it pops, it actually does something else. And I turn it around and I leak it, shrieking it as loud as I can. And I shared that's how we are when we're yelling and screaming at somebody, maybe calling somebody a name, maybe even to their face. But we also do it sometimes behind their back. Maybe
Right.
it's gossiping about somebody or spreading a rumor. Sometimes we want to isolate other people. Maybe we just isolate ourselves. We're also really good at that body language stuff. And they get this. They know. They've done it. They've been there, or they've had it done to them. So I often say, how many of you know what it feels like to have a balloon leaked on you? And they'll raise their hands. How many of you have leaked your balloons? And then they all giggle, but they admit it. And from there, then we talk about why a balloon leaks. And it's because we have needs. We're humans. And when we have a need, we feel threatened. And that threat feels a lot. And so we need to protect ourselves. However, needs are more like kindness or space or a hug or a friendship or somebody to listen. And how the I message works is I feel, and then you have a word. I also have a word bank for them that has faces that match. And when people, I need, will you please? And it's the script we stick to closely to when people, because all of my little Yorkies will throw a sibling under the bus real quick if I let them. But I always say, whoa, 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 whoa. And
Right.
so what is it that your sibling does that you don't like? And often it's like, well, she steals my clothes. And I say, okay, so would it be okay if tomorrow morning I come over to your house and I steal your clothes? Well, no. And I said, okay, so like most people, right? All people lose their affections. So they understand that it's not just their siblings that irritate them or get under their skin. That type of behavior from anybody would.
So, Monique, what I'm really curious about is fast forward for me. So, say students have been through this program with you and they've learned about their emotions, they've learned about the balloon theory, they understand the I message. let's fast forward them into their high school life and into their adult life. What are you hoping these foundational behaviors are going to do for them when they're in their teen years or when they get into university, into their adult years?
Love that. Thank you for the question. Lesson three, right after the I message, which is lesson two, begins on the vagus nerve and how our bodies are talking to our minds as much as our minds are talking to our brain or our bodies, and as well as discussing the importance of self-talk and how we tell ourselves we can't. It's a belief,
Hmm.
and it has been planted there, and there's a reason that it's there, and it was to protect us. However, truthfully, our brains are very malleable, and they are for life, and we can actually train ourselves to do and believe what we would like. And so when we are talking about the vagus nerve, we go into a little bit of the polyvagal theory and talk about fight, flight, freeze in the sympathetic nervous system. And then we talk about rest and digest in the parasympathetic. And from that lesson, we do a little bit of breathing techniques. And we talk about the importance of yoga and meditation and mindfulness, journaling, and then also how the quickest way to get our nervous systems back to homeostasis is chanting, humming, singing, and physical activity. And so when we are on a team and we're like grunting and cheering and on the sidelines and stomping our feet, all of this type of work is somatic healing. And what I really, really hope for these young people to then go up into high school is to search out something that is a practice for them, that works for them, that is something that will help them stay regulated when it comes to their nervous system. If we are in a constant state of survival, our anxiety and our depression could then actually dip into. And this is where we're seeing in the world a increase in depression and anxiety, especially among young women. And for me, I want them to remember how limitless they can be,
Hmm.
not limited.
Hmm.
And when we're taking care of our bodies, that is the fastest way to do this. I always tell my students, I love your brains and I know they're beautiful brains, but unless you have a body that is healthy, we can't take them places. And gosh, it would be such a shame if you can't take those beautiful brains all the places you want to go. So it would be remembering, slow down, take care of your body, take care of that nervous system. Like the vagus nerve is speaking to us all the time. And if we get into that state where we're shaky and we are feeling that way, that is her speaking to us. Sorry, I teach wit girls, so
Yeah.
she's often a girl, but that's our
Yeah.
vagus nerve. He or him, they, them, but that nerve is so important, and it is partly responsible for our fight, flight, freeze, our nervous system altogether, our brain, our spinal cord, and our nerves are all connected, and they're always speaking back and forth to one another. And the more we can understand that and be aware of it, the more we get ourselves. And yeah, so I'm not sure if I answered that
No, that's
correctly.
great. No, no, it led us to an interesting topic with it, which is this whole piece around, the vagus nerve. I think there's more work being done around the vagus nerve for adults, at least, and then for kids, but just in general, devices like the Pulsetto vagal nerve stimulator, they make one that you can put in your palm of your hand to do it. As you say, simply humming or singing will provide you a way to activate your vagus nerve. And I think, that to learn that at a young, like at the young age, versus having to try to figure that with all the programming that goes along with it as an adult, right? Where it's much harder, I think, the older you get to deal with the neuroplasticity required to kind of unwire all of that, as you say, all that inside chatter that occurs.
Mm.
I think learning that at a young age provides kids such a leg forward to deal with the stress is just going to be there. And so the ability to use our bodies to help to control how we're feeling and to support our well-being, I think is beautiful.
So, yeah, the final part of the whole cherry on top would be the aha moment they get when I share with them. the two parts of the brain that are most responsible for our feelings. One being from 6.5 million years ago when we needed to stay alive from the threats of living in a cave, like cave bears and hyenas and wolves and, woolly mammoth. And then there's the prefrontal cortex, which developed later on, about 300,000 years ago, when we got really smart. And the smarter we got, the prettier and less hairy we got. And we started making things like houses and electricity, and we don't have those same threats. However, we still have those same parts of the body. And colloquially, with the grade ones and threes, we use the term for the amygdala, the monkey brain, and then we use this part as the smart brain or the new brain. But they understand that our reactions go to the amygdala first, and then they go to our prefrontal cortex second. And it's within zero point 0.6 seconds that that happens. But within that zero point 0.6 seconds, it's the difference between reacting quickly or taking the time to process what just happened. So I walk them through a scenario, and I always ask somebody if I can use them as an example, but I ask them if they've ever been through something or seen something like this, and I'll trip over a student. And I have watched this in every one of my classes where a student will trip over another one, and one of two things will happen. Either they'll turn around quickly and say, I'm sorry, or they'll turn around and blame it on that student and ask them why on earth they put it. Like, it was like, what? That was you. So there's created what's called an accountability chart. And it's another resource that I have that walks them through this process of, and every student agrees that they have either seen it, been
Yeah.
through it, know what I'm talking about,
Right.
right? We do as adults, we do this all
Of
the
course.
time. All the time.
Driving, people thinking people cut them off or whatever, road rage, all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah.
Exactly. You think somebody's cut you off, really, they're just not paying attention whatsoever. But we're angry, right? And it goes to, and that's the amygdala first. That's when it is reacting. We have perceived a threat and we need to go into some sort of defense mode. And if we take that extra zero point 0.6 seconds, process what happened, realize that we were in the wrong, a quick I'm sorry will take care of it. And as we're discovering, like, this is the newest one that we're just going through right now at school. And these students are just absolutely flooring me this year. They want, like I said, they want to do skits. And they're like, can we act one out? Can we make them up? Can we like, and you don't want to go play a game? Like, you want to do more of this? And I just love that they're excited about talking about these things and about sort of opening up these cans of worms that they haven't been able to really express or talk about or learn from. And the last piece of all of it is I have this giant rollout. It's 10 feet long.
Okay.
And it goes across the floor, and it's called the Peace Path. And it's an 8-step process to the proper apology. And this last final piece is just really teaching about how we all come from a very different home. And each set of our grown-ups teach us very different sets of how to show up in the world. And a lot of times our brains aren't processing exactly the same way as somebody else's. And so when somebody says something to you, they may not mean it as any like threat or insult or whatsoever, but our brains will do something because we've been taught that way. And the first step is to explain what happened for me was, and then the next person has the chance to say, well, what happened for me was. And we get to see the perspective, and possibly it was just a misunderstanding. And then there's 7 more beautiful steps. And then in the final, it's to shake hands and leave in peace. I've come up with 11 different scenarios that have all happened in our school and written them out, and the kids get to practice what it would feel like putting themselves in somebody else's shoes, just to have that extra empathy piece and the practice of a proper apology and that last step.
I love that you're teaching kids the apology piece so early. I had a guest on the podcast a while ago, and his focus is on relationships, and he's got the relationship school. And what Jason talks about is the conflict repair cycle. And he said the thing he finds that works really well in adult relationships, and particularly he was talking about intimate relationships, but it could be friendships or anytime you're close with another person, is this ability to shorten the conflict repair cycle. So in relationship, we are going to have conflicts, and the time it takes, the cycle and this space that it takes for us to repair that conflict, the shorter and better we get at it, and the shorter it is, the better off we're both going to be, because we're going to be constantly in that cycle together. And so kids learning how to do an apology as early as possible is just going to benefit every relationship they have in their life moving forward.
It's the hope. Doing the ISABC leadership program, as I was going through it, I was thinking, why don't we trust young people with this? Even reading the beautiful book that you had bought me or gave me, like, it's why aren't we trusting young people with this? And the more that I provide for them, the more it feels like this is what they really want. They want to know how to control their emotions so that they're not in fights with their best friends. The 5 pillars of health that we are constantly referring back to in all of these lessons are sleep, physical activity, hygiene, hydration, there it is,
Yeah.
and nutrition. But I asked them, how many of you can sleep well when you are in a fight with one of your friends? And none of them can. And then most classes will say it's even worse when it's one of my parents. Or the opposite. Well, it's even worse when it's one of my friends. But
Right.
there's this sense of, we can't take care of our nervous system and we can't take care of our bodies unless we are taking care of those 5 pillars of health. And we have the pillars up with a roof and it says health on the top. And we talk about how when one of those pillars is gone, typically that roof will stay up. But when we start pulling off 2 or 3 of those pillars, that's when the health now tips or possibly falls and we found ourselves in bed sick or worse. So keeping those are really important. So when we're linking that back with our health constantly in these conversations, they do realize that our feelings are really, really tied and linked to that our mental health, our
Mhm.
physical health, our social health, our emotional health.
What do you
And
wish?
that is the whole sort of definition of health. It's not just a lack of being sick.
Mm.
There's a balance between all of this.
What do you wish that kids knew about about the inner voice?
I wish they knew how to absolutely like eradicate and beat up the limited voices that were put there by somebody else. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, because
Limiting
I mean, I
voices
think
don't
I wish
come
that
from
for
them.
adults too.
Limiting voices do not come from children.
Yeah.
They are everything. That is the best part of teaching them. I thought I would never teach little kids when I started, and now I don't know who I would like. I absolutely adore teaching tiny humans because they are limitless until us adults accidentally, most of the time it's an accident, we don't mean to, but we put a voice inside their heads that tells them they're not they're not enough or they're not good enough.
I think, for adults, like it's a interesting concept when you ask adults, like, who is the voice? Like, is it you? Because would you speak that way to like a close friend or somebody you cared about? And most people would say, well, no. So it's like, well, then where's the voice coming from? And I think your reflection is everything I've read in my experience is that the voices are the voices of others, but they somehow get into our conscious mind and we tell ourselves that it's us. It's me saying these things and the things are true. And I think that my thoughts are not true is a pretty powerful affirmation. And I would add to it that the voice in my head, when it's disparaging to me or it's negative, I can just tell it to stop. Some people actually name the voice and like, as a
I have
character.
names for my voices.
Do you?
I
Right?
do, yeah.
Yeah, and so do I actually. And so it's like because I'm like I don't. This isn't me. This is who I want then to be. So then why is this voice showing up? And I don't find it helpful. And I'm grateful that you're giving kids this knowledge so early because man, it's way harder as an adult to kind of unwire these voices because they've just been there for so long and they feel like us.
That triggered not triggered, but it sparked the memory of how I began pushing so hard and why I won't stop. We were having what was called an integration day, and it was a day that was no schedule. And we were allowing the kids to sort of pick and choose what they wanted. But at the little school in the in the kindergarten classes, the teachers asked if I could do a social emotional lesson. And I thought, yeah, absolutely, that would be fantastic. So I brought over some materials and we went through this amazing lesson. It was so much fun. I think I broke a couple of their hearts, but I had these beautiful colored feathers and I put them everywhere out in the field in this little garden area. And I told them that the feathers were compliments. And so I gave them this really wonderful compliment. And I said, so now you can choose whatever color, whatever size, whatever one you want, but I want you to know that that feather represents the words that I just said. And so they put them in this clear cup and they were so proud of it. And then I had each kindergarten teacher give them another compliment and then could choose their feather. And some kids chose the same colors, some stuck to like neutral or matching colors, some were all rainbow. And then I asked them to give each other a compliment and then find somebody new. And eventually they had these little cups filled with these
Mm.
beautiful feathers. This is where the heartbreak comes in because I brought them over to the little garden area and I said, okay, so now we're going to shift the conversation a little to talk about what are some of the things that we do on the playground that aren't so nice, that don't feel like compliments. And of course, the first kid said, well, and I went, whoa, whoa, when people, we're going to stick with when people, but when people call me names. I said, okay,
Mm.
great. So now I'm going to ask you to pick up a little bit of dirt. And we had dirt in our hands and we had our cups. And there were some kids that could not do it. They refused because that little 5-year-old heart was going to break too much to put
Mm.
dirt all over their colored feathers. Some of them dumped on just like I did. But at the end of it, I asked them to shake out all the dirt, take it all off the feathers, and then they put their feathers back in. And I asked if they could still see the remaining dirt that was still on the feathers. They said yes. And I said, so as you can see, we can always say sorry and we can clean up the mess that we made. But oftentimes there's going to be a little bit left over, and that's the memories. That's
Mm.
the part where we can't really just forget it. So that sorry really does mean something. And then the forgiveness piece after. And it was just such a sweet lesson. I had them in this space where they were just like cuddly and vulnerable. And there were other teachers there that were all just like in this space. So I said to them, could I ask you what it sounds like in your head when you're in trouble? What does it sound like? And the first answer shocked me. And I actually share this in my workshop when I go to other schools. And she said, I hate you.
Mm.
And it shocked me because for a second she was looking directly at me. And then I went, my friend, that's what you say to yourself? And she
Mm.
got tears in her eyes. And I
Mm.
said, okay, thank you so much for sharing. And then the little voices came out, and it was, why did you do that? You're dumb, you're bad, you're not, and you shouldn't. And I was stuck there with these 5-year-olds with tears streaming in my eyes because my child at that time was 3.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, wow, I'm 2 years away from my kid thinking I hate myself, or is he
Mm.
already there? Like, when do we start these voices? When do they come in? And yeah, that would have been, I think, May of 2023. So we were within months of that big flow state. And from that moment, I was like, this program needs to happen. I can't live in a world where 5-year-olds hate themselves.
Monique, I love the work that you're doing. This is beautiful that we're ending on that story because that was such a beautiful story and a beautiful exercise too that you have the kids go through so that you can actually hear what's in their hearts, both them taking in the compliments, but when they're hard on themselves and understanding the value of an apology and what it can do for another person. Thank you for making the time for this. We'll drop the links so people can get in touch with you in the show notes. And yeah, my friend, thank you for making time for me.
Thank you so much. This has been my absolute pleasure. And I appreciate you coming into my life and being able to teach your child and just the friendship that we've sparked over the years through getting to know each other. And you're awesome. Thank
It's,
you.
it's truly an honor.